Thank you, Chris. And Jennifer.
Good evening, and thanks to all for hosting this forum, and thanks to everyone who came out tonight and those who are watching at home. I'm Jennifer Deabte, and I want your vote on September 15th. And while I respect Jason and Chris and what they bring to the race, Jason as an executive in a labor union and Chris as a small business owner, my experience, skills, and vision are the right combination for our city right now. My enthusiasm for our city only grows as this race goes on. I've lived and worked in this city for more than 22 years. I have been a business owner, a resident, a volunteer, and the mayor. I understand the issues, and I am prepared to deliver concrete solutions right now. And I'm proud of the accomplishments of the 4 years that I was in City Hall. Most of you can picture in your mind's eye what Carroll Creek looked like with those Tinker toys, and now how great it looks today. And some of you, I see Eva back there, have taken classes at the Tally Rec Center. Most of you, based on the numbers, have had to call the Frederick Police Department in the last year, and I'm proud of the Chief of Police that we brought and the 14 new positions that we created in that department. But, you know, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. As proud as I am of those accomplishments, I know that we started those changes and we're not yet done. We all want to live in a safe and welcoming, progressive, prosperous, and thriving city. But we're going to have to deal with big issues: the pension, the buyout, the debt payments, capital projects when they come, when they can't come, and our workforce, how expensive it is to keep employees on the books. Economic development and growth are big issues facing the current board, and they'll face the next mayor and board. And whether this group votes to annex or not, we are going to have to make sure we invest in adequate infrastructure, sticking to the principles of smart growth and making developers live up to their conditions of annexation. We don't have much time. Go to jenniferformayor.com, and I'll ask you to stick around and ask questions afterwards. Thank you very much for your consideration tonight, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to our first round. This is a set question round. As I said before, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the question and 30 seconds of rebuttal time. So, if you would like to open your first envelope, ladies and gentlemen, the question is, do you believe the city has dealt adequately with the pace and progress of deciding city growth? And to lead us off this round, in a randomly chosen order, Chris Simpson.
The city is not in a horrible situation. Big annex coming up on the north end right now, everybody's worried about, but they also broke ground for Monocacy. From what I can tell, they're going to try to time it at the same time so that the road comes around and the people that are going to be traveling aren't all going to be traveling on 15. That's been a huge concern. The Carroll Creek project, everything that's going along seems to be going fine. I don't see huge mistakes with the city right now. I want to keep the direction. Yes.
Thank you, Chris. Jason?
I tend to think in terms of growth, in terms of jobs. Frederick has to do a better job helping small businesses and large set up here and grow their businesses. We need to do a couple of things specifically. One is we need to rewrite our land management code, which is a labyrinth. It runs to about 1,400 pages. The average for a city of our size is about 500 pages. This is a code that was enacted in Jennifer Doherty's administration, and it's cost us, because of its complexity, jobs, investments, and revenue as a city. We find that we're always scrambling year after year to close budget gaps. We seem to lurch from one crisis to another. We end up selling off city properties in order to close budget gaps. One of those properties is the old Carmack J's on North Market Street. I'm sure many of you used to shop there. It's been empty. It's been empty since the late 90s. It's been empty since we sold it to a developer in 2002. And it's about time, when we talk about growth, that we start looking at infill and redevelopment. And the Carmack J's project is just one example of failed redevelopment. There are other parts of the city that we ought to be growing into. One is the old Brickworks, a property on the city's south side of 65 acres. Another is the old mall on the west side. We need new visions, new imaginations, so that we can bring projects into these sites and use them to grow the city's economy. There is talk now about annexing properties on the city's north side. Before we make investments like that, before the city puts down money for infrastructure, before the city commits to annex those properties, we have to know that the traffic and other infrastructure issues are going to be handled. The city can't build this alone, and it's the responsibility of developers to work with the city to make sure that we're growing in a way that's sustainable.
Thank you, Jason. Jenna.
The city hasn't always dealt with growth well. In fact, when I came to office in 2002, we were facing a pretty serious problem. If you lived here then, you knew that the city had doubled in size and had used up its water resources. I was forced to declare a water moratorium, or a building moratorium based on water. We also had an annexation moratorium, which may have led to what's going on right now with a number of pent-up annexations trying to get into the city limits. While that moratorium was in place, we tried to work on things to make sure that the infrastructure was in place and the adequate funding sources were there when the development came. You know, one thing that you may not know is that in the annexation agreements that the city negotiates, the developer pays for the infrastructure improvements. And if we don't have that land annexed, unfortunately, the bonded debt that the city has already issued is going to be passed on to taxpayers, you and me. The best example of that is what happened with the Hargett farm. Everybody likes the idea of a park, but there's no transparency in making these decisions. The current administration took 600 houses out of the development scheme, but we're still going to have to pay for the water and sewer infrastructure improvements. We're still going to have to pay for the road improvements. That's the kind of discussion you have to have when you're talking about growth and managing growth well. And as far as the land management code, you know, it's kind of hard to have it both ways. Some people say the Historic Preservation Commission needs to be more specific, and other people say it needs to be more liberal. Well, the opportunities in the land management code, all 1,400 pages of it, do create those opportunities. No, it's not easy, but it shouldn't be easy to develop in the city of Frederick. We need to know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and when you're going to do it, because the public has an expectation. Anybody who's had a commercial or residential development in their neighborhood, they know the impacts. They want to make sure that the standards are strict. And the development community is willing to pay as long as the rules don't keep changing. That's the big thing. Transparency in government, predictability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidates. Starting with Mr. Simpson, would you like to use your 30-second buffer time?
Yes. Mentioned West End Mall. The mall has been planning things for years, over 8 years, and the development keeps changing, not so much because of Frederick City, but because the owner wasn't sure what she was going to do with it. At one point it was residents mixed with the mall. The economy obviously didn't let that happen, so she couldn't build what she wanted. They were talking 400 condos with a 2-story mall and a large parking deck. So there's plans out there, things are coming, we just need to make sure we can facilitate and help them do whatever it is they're going to try to do.
Thank you. Jason, would you care to use your words?
Yes, I disagree with something Jennifer Doherty said. I don't think it should be difficult for small businesses to get started in Frederick. I don't think small businesses should be forced to go through this labyrinth and 1,400-page document and figure out exactly what they need to be doing. We will appoint in the mayor's office, if we win this race, an advocate who will work with small businesses to make sure they're getting through the process and at the same time fix our system so that all the businesses and investors who follow them won't have to go through the same thing.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Well, I appreciate your position, Jason. I just happen to know that the Department of Economic Development already does that, working with small businesses. I've opened 2 small businesses in Frederick, and it's really not that tough. One was even in the historic district. The purpose of the code is to make sure that land development, not small business economic development, that really does fall under a different category, is handled in a transparent and fair way. Everybody wants business to develop in Frederick. I'm a business person. I want that too.